All right, another edition of Truth Seekers today. Today's topic is consistency. Very interesting topic to me because consistency applies to both positive and negative, good and bad things. So that's important to just be aware of consistency. But I think to start off, it would be useful for us to all agree upon a definition. So I might ask Jonathan today. Our guests are Jonathan and Imran. And of course, we have Coach Nick and Coach Josh. So kick it off with Jonathan. Do you have a definition we can start out with to talk about and to discuss?
For consistency,
Yes.
I would say doing something habitually toward a common goal.
So a common goal implying that there's other people involved as well, or just yourself, or?
No, I guess without using the word consistent and the definition of consistent, like that goal is, common to you and your habits that contribute toward that.
Got it. Okay. Imran, thoughts on that? Build off of that?
Sure. When I think of consistency, I think of a pattern of behavior, engaging in a certain pattern of behavior that lends itself towards either a positive outcome or a detrimental effect. So it could either be both being consistent in a positive manner or in a negative manner when we're talking about habits.
Imran, is there a danger level of recognizing, like, how do we know when it's detrimental to us to have some of these consistent habitual behaviors?
I'm a proponent of believing that we are a creature of habit, for better or for worse. And when we engage in certain types of behavior and we, pretty much convey some sort of behavior pattern and also emotions, people tend to see what type of person we are. And when you are a good person, you say, oh, what makes them a good person? Well, they did good things. Well, what do they do? That's a bad person. Well, why are they a bad person? Well, they engage in this type of behavior. So as far as engaging in certain types of patterns of behavior, that really lends itself to what type of person you become.
Interesting. Nick, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's cool because it starts to overlap with beliefs and identity that we had on the show a couple of weeks back. I think there's definitely an overlap there. Whatever you do consistently over time is, I think what Imran's saying is who you become, and not necessarily made that connection between those two things. But yeah, consistency over time is what are you doing consistently and what do you want to get. So just being, I think the biggest thing for me is like the intentionality is the difference. It's like if you are consciously doing something every day to get to, as Jonathan said, to a goal. And as Imran said, we're creatures of habit. Because if we're not, the only difference is the intentionality. Because we're going to do things repeatedly. It's just, are we clear about what they are and why we're doing those things? Yeah.
So I guess last question on defining it. What is there a difference between consistency and habit? Like, what's the difference between those two things? Open forum, whoever wants to.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I'm not sure. The consistency and habit, I guess habit for me is something that you do as a course. Like it's just something, I think that's for me more across to the identity piece. It's just something that you do. It's who you are. Like for me, it's very difficult to not work out more than 2 days in a row. Like even if I'm on vacation, it's very difficult for me to not work out more than 2 days in a row. I get pulled back to it. And it's odd for me that anyone who has the opposite, not to say it's wrong, no judgment, but just for me, that's just a habit for me. And consistent is probably more for me is the intentionally to do something before it becomes a habit. I guess that's how I think about it.
I saw John smile. I think it resonated with working out. So hit us with it, John. How does that apply to you?
I think I agree with what Nick said about the intentionality. I think that's almost the difference. I mean, habits are things, unless like the book, The Power of Habit, like you actually insert that intentionality into it. Habits are more some things that we kind of fall into by nature. And I think consistency is a more active and mindful process, and it's what kickstarts changing habits. But I think it's that mindfulness and being aware of something, and that's why I use the goal in my definition, because it's kind of like a more systematic way to pattern your behavior, like Imran said.
Yeah. Imran, that resonated with you?
Oh yeah. When you think of even just the differences between consistency and habits, when you think of habit, that's, every day, whatever you may do, you wake up, you pray, you eat breakfast, you wake up, you go to work, or you work out. Then from there you go to work, whatever that may be. As far as consistency, when I think of consistency, is how long can you uphold habits over a period of time? And when you think of that, when you think of going back to what I said earlier, as far as we're a creature of habit, we can break habits. We can break habits and create new ones. And so, and when you're trying to break old habits and build new ones, how can you stay consistent with that over time? And when you think about that, I can kind of see how the two overlap, but also how those two are distinguished.
So Imran, how do we know when it's time to find something else to be consistent about?
Really, the universe. I believe the universe talks to us, and whether it be our personal lives or our professional lives, and we either choose to listen or ignore it. And if you know that, oh man, if you're, say, a smoker, oh man, my lungs are hurting, I'm coughing a lot. Well, chances are you should probably stop. It's whether you listen to your, body or not. And, that's something that's like, okay, I need to develop new habits. I need to be more consistent in those new habits. But delving into that, I know that's a very broad example, very general example, but that will dictate, a person's health and whether it gets better or not.
I think that's a perfect example. Nick, maybe you can go into like my takeaway from that was there's feedback all around us of what our consistency is or what our habits are producing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, they're absolutely feedback all around us. And when you start to say that, Imran, I started to get fearful, because I get reminded of that the problem here is that it's the small things, seemingly small things, that equal the big things. And we've got to be very conscious about what they look like. That smoking is a great example, because everyone now in the world knows smoking kills you. I think it's difficult to refute that fact anywhere, yet there are still people that smoke, because I don't think about it as smoking. They think about it as one cigarette. And it's not one cigarette that makes a difference, obviously, but it's the one that leads to the next one, and the one that leads to the next one after that. And so that's what is dangerous, because it's like, well, what is that small thing that you did today that that it doesn't serve you to be the person that you want to be? And it seems like nothing, and that's what it scares me, because I'm like, what is that small thing? Because I'm moving towards something I don't want to be moving towards. And it's not, and on its own, it's fine, but it's not in a vacuum, because you've got to keep equating it with what am I consistently doing that sends me to the place where I want to be. Or you can think about it like if you start on a journey, you end up at a destination. If you smoke, the destination is getting sick through smoking, really sick, dying. So it's what you're doing today really does create your destiny or your destination. It can't help but do that. So I guess the connection is, okay, well, what do I ultimately want? What is my destination I want to be going? So that what is the consistent habit that I need to start to build or do every day to put me on that path? Like, am I going in the right place?
And to build on that, what are the habits that might be preventing me from achieving that?
Yep.
John, any thoughts on that?
I just think, I think it goes positive and negative. Like you guys said, the results are everywhere, but they're not always right in front of you. And I think that's the toughest part of positive and negative results. Like with smoking, it's one cigarette. You don't see 20 years down the road when you're on a ventilator, working out, you want 6-pack, but you don't see one day sit-ups bringing you that. Like you can't be married to the short term. I think that's the roadblock for a lot of people. you need to focus on that long-term goal, like I said. And I think it's important to have the people around you too that remind you of those short-term things, to keep you focused, because other people too might notice things that you don't, whether it's in your behavior, whether it's in the results. Like, you see yourself every day. Like, some people might see things in you that you don't see. So I think that's important to keep those kinds of people around you too, to keep you motivated, or, you know, keep you in check when you need it.
I think that's huge. It's been a theme on a couple of our Truth Seekers editions here, is bringing the right people with you. I think that's it's twofold. It's, you motivate each other to be better, right? But then you're also getting that feedback from somebody outside yourself that sees you in a different light, maybe, and can maybe reflect back some things that you're, I don't know, putting out there, producing, or resonating with, that maybe you don't want to be. So it's almost like a check on yourself to have these people around you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's create the environment that you want for success, right? If you're in an environment where everyone around you is super successful in business, and you want to be a successful business person, then the likelihood is that that environment's going to support you on that path, right? If everyone around you, you want to stop smoking, and everyone around you smokes, other way around, right? To your point, John, like it's negative and it's positive. You got to create that, because either way, time's going to pass. Either way, things are going to happen. So it's making sure that you, I mean, that's one of the great things about coaching, right? That's what we do. It's make sure we're consistent with bringing together and doing the actions that get you to where you want to be, and then get clear about where you do want to be in the first place. So it's have the right people around you. It's have mentors around you. It's get yourself a coach, have a team of people, have supporting friends, supporting family, and just make sure that environment is where you want to be, because that ultimately that's going to be a big indicator of where you go and what you get.
Mm-hmm.
I like the concept of being intentional about that, because then you can more accurately define the things you want to be consistent about. So the image I got with the smoker stuff is like, maybe there's like, people don't want to get cancer, right? But why do people smoke? You know, and they find themselves around other smokers. They take breaks together and go out, you know? So I don't know. I don't want to judge a whole sect of people there, but like, you know, it's interesting to me. Like, you know, if you know that it's going to make you sick and you still do it, there's a level of like self-awareness and reflection that's important to recognize if it's serving you towards what you want to move towards. And maybe you're not moving towards anything in particular, or the thing that you're moving towards isn't as important as having that daily fix, or, you know, that one cigarette in that moment, etc.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
If you haven't got a compelling future, why do you care? Right? So if you haven't said, look, in 3 years' time, this is the person I'm going to be, and it's going to be magnificent, and I'm going to be changing lives. People around me are going to be at a different level because of it. I'm going to impact all these people. My family's going to be fantastic. I'm going to be this person. And if you haven't got that, then, you know, why do you care? Because there's no future that's compelling you. It's in the moment. Like, it's the pleasure in the moment. It's always going to beat the pleasure down the road if you haven't got created that.
Yeah.
That's kind of working backwards from the goal too. Like, if you don't see what you're doing as something that it's going to impede you from getting your goal, or, you know, disrupt your road, then, it's no big deal.
Right.
But if you connect those two, it's a lot easier to kind of get off that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to constantly be reassessing, because you create new goals and you have new destinations that you want to go to. So it's always, you know, a particular habit that you might have put on cruise control that you're not thinking about is fine for the first 9 goals that you created for in the year 2020. But that 10th goal, maybe that thing that you kind of put on the back shelf is not serving you anymore. So that's where that, you know, it's a continued importance to keep reassessing.
Coach, what do you think about how you keep that associated to you in your life, like those important things? Because as you said, it's often that we're all complex creatures, and to quote Imran, we're creatures of habit as well, and we've got all of these different areas to focus on. How do we keep everything front and center?
I got an idea, but I'll let Imran, if you want to take this one.
Just repeat that last part, Coach Nick.
Well, if we've got all of these different areas that we're focused in on, all these different goals, like how do we keep everything front and center? Like how do we keep associated with the things that are most important?
So the way I interpret that is as far as staying focused, and really delving into what we want, because whatever stage we are in our careers and our lives, we all want something. It's just whether we're willing to compartmentalize and focus on what we need to do to achieve them. And working with Coach Josh, I realized that there's a lot of quote unquote distractions in life, but having to compartmentalize that is a challenge in and of itself. But to visualize ourselves in whatever.
We're losing him a little bit.
Technical problems with Imran.
Might have to move on. He'll rejoin us when he's ready.
And
Imran, if you can hear us, you're lagging out a little bit. So we're going to move on here. So
on the top.
I'd like to.
But
I'm just going to
staying on the topic of a part of the soccer game because I got to smoke on the other side of the field.
Some good bits in there.
Okay, I guess we move on. All right, so what are the themes here, Coach? What have you picked up on so far?
Yeah, so I'm starting with creatures of habit, but the importance of assessing and reassessing and breaking it down into like everyday things that we can be consistent about. So there's a level of awareness there. There's a level of feedback that's important. I'm just kind of spitballing generally here. So maybe John can help us narrow it down a little bit here.
I think kind of going along with what you were just asking, Coach Nick, I think if you find a way to connect everything, like if you keep, obviously not every single one thing is focused on a common goal, but if you can connect everything, like this one thing affects this, which in turn contributes to this too. Because I mean, how many people are living, terribly complicated lives where there are so many different things that don't contribute to what they want? If they are, that's a problem, and you got to pare that down. But I think for the people who are really looking to stay consistent and to keep focused on certain things, I think there is a common thread within all those things that you can follow along to kind of keep you, even if your ship is this wide, it's at least pointed in the same direction. So
I love this because this makes me think about your life plan overall, right? The highest level of, we're talking about goals and where do you want to go, but if you extrapolate that out, ultimately it's the vision for what you want your life to be. What's the legacy of your life? If you're looking back, you're 95 years old, what does your life look like? How do you think about that? And then take that down a level to all of the different areas or the categories of your life, and then the roles you play in those categories. You can start to have goals, like short to medium term goals, like a year, 2 years, even 6 months, that move you towards those visions. And so I think what you're saying, John, is that if you can do one thing or a couple of things to connect, like a good example for me would be, if I go, of categories of my life would be my business, will be friends, would be health, for instance. There's 3 examples. So if I go and have a workout with one of my clients, I've got who's also my friend. I've got time spent with my friend. I've got working on my business, and I've got my health in one. So I think that's what you're saying, right? It's how do we connect the consistency to match what we want in life in those different areas, and the more that we can bring them together, that's going to give us ultimately more fulfillment overall in our life. I love that. Thanks.
Expand the sweet spot.
Expand the sweet spots. Yeah.
So, Imran, one thing that resonated with me earlier is you said like the universe speaks to us. So my way of putting that into words is like take the path of least resistance. There's something like stress is caused by resistance is one of my beliefs. So talk to me a little bit more. Maybe we can get a takeaway from that.
As far as people, I don't like to believe that people like to take the path of least resistance. But when the universe speaks to us, I believe that we are challenged, and it's whether we want to respond to the challenge. And I feel like people who are on this call, like Coach Nick, John, Coach Josh, I feel like we're people that when we have a certain type of situation we have to respond to, we do. Majority of people don't, for whatever reason. And what trauma, fear of failure, whatever it may be. And being able to respond to that stimulus really dictates the course that your life will take. And to tie that to consistency, if you develop good habits, if you do it for a longer period of time, you're going to see the fruits of that labor. However, on the flip side of that, if you engage in bad habits and then you wonder why your life has spiraled out of control, I mean, you can pinpoint it. Similar to what Coach Nick said, it's not that one cigarette. It's that one cigarette that leads to the next cigarette, then that leads to the next one. And then it's just, we are some of our habits. We are some of our habits. And what we do, when you hear a famous athlete that goes to prison or gets indicted for something, it's like, how did he get here? One decision didn't get them there. They made several decisions that got him to that point. Or on the flip side of things, how did this celebrity or politician, how were they able to succeed in this endeavor? It's like, well, they made a lot of good decisions that led to that particular moment. So as far as dealing with the path of least resistance, it's our willingness and ability to respond to difficult stimulus.
I think that this is really where it begins for me. Like what you said, is about stress caused by resistance. And I think stress is just like the achiever's word for fear, because ultimately we're all scared of something, right? They're scared of not being enough, not being loved. And if we have that fear, we're likely not to take action, because if we do something, it's going to make things worse. What if we do something? What if I put myself out there? What if I do these things? I'm going to get in a worse position. But I believe that the biggest thing that I'm scared about is losing time, wasting time, because then it's stuff we can't get back. So anytime that there's that resistance that comes from fear, comes from stress. Stress is usually just making things bigger than they really are. We just get focused on what we really want, get consistent about the small things we need to do every day and move towards them. Because otherwise it's going to cost us. We're going to wake up, we're going to be 95 years old, and none of the things we want in our life, none of the legacy we wanted to have exists. So I lean into that resistance, Josh, to your point, and get some of that fear. Like have that fear. Great. Take some action, be consistent, move towards what you want.
What's the opposite of fear?
Freedom, choice,
courage,
intentionality. Yeah.
Sometimes, like to get new things that we know we want but we don't have, we got to do new things. We got to implement new consistencies, new habits. There's a sense of overcoming that fear that I think manifests itself in courage. It's a very courageous act to do that.
And I believe that courage is not the absence of fear. It's seeing it and saying, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, there's nothing to fear except fear itself. And I'm loved if I know we're kind of pushing up against the time here, but gents, I'm sure that there's been top points in your life where you felt that fear or that resistance to do something, and then the moment that you make the decision to actually do it, I'm committed, I'm all in, that fear just disappears. Because all it is the fear itself. It's just that second, that moment you cross over, it's like everything changes. Now everything's okay. It's done. I'm all in. So I got to burn the boats.
Yeah.
You guys know who David Goggins is?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't.
You should look him up.
Dude,
you can't be afraid of anything. Like anything that you don't want to do, there's really no excuse after you watch this guy talk for 20 minutes. That's the definition of like looking at stress and fear and pain in the face and just saying, oh well.
I like
Got to do it.
Sure.
Any other takeaways to share before we wrap up here?
I just want to say that the interesting thing, Coach Nick, you're talking about is the little things. It's funny. 75-80% of the little things are the most obvious things, like getting up early, working out, eating right, not smoking, all the things that everybody knows are the right things to do, and I feel like are also the things that people are most inconsistent on. So I feel like that's the toughest but also kind of the easiest start, is to just nail down those things, and then if you're mindful about the rest, like you're gonna get that other 20-25% and really move the needle.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. Appreciate you joining us in this edition of Truth Seekers. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.